We are recording, continuing on the launch phase, moving on to worksheet number 2 called Quantitative Data Analysis. I'll read through the instructions. For this worksheet, we are using the Promise app to identify the quantitative data points you find most interesting or troubling in regards to the holistic learning outcomes. If you're curious about what those outcomes are, you can see the first page of this section for reference. So at the beginning of the launch phase, it lists all of the learning outcomes. So using an equity lens means looking out for those who do not get everything they need to survive and thrive. We want to think about how you can use the quantitative data to identify populations of students who are outperforming or underperforming at your school. So we're going to go ahead and start with number 1, where it says interesting quantitative data points, and we'll start from there.
Okay, that sounds great. And in this instance, I think it's important to just say we don't have Promise app data. So we're going to rely on other outside research in terms of what we know about the situation of students learning at home. So what are some interesting statistics or data points that we might draw from?
Well, one that I think is interesting to me is trying to understand the percentage of parents who are now working from home. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I found was that previously, through the World Economic Forum, they put out a piece of research at the beginning of sort of the middle of March of this year. They said that previously only 7% of U.S. workers had the option to work at home, and that now that is increasing quite substantially.
Okay.
So I might use upwards of potentially 25% of individuals now.
Oh, wow. Great. Okay. So yeah, if you want to put maybe 25% or however much that is an increase of people working from home while their students are also learning from home. I also wonder, I found an article around the educational disruption and response. So I think putting in context how many students are at home. So we have families working at home, students working at home. And in this UNESCO article, it says that 70% of the world's student population are experiencing closures and are learning from home now. So I'll go ahead and add that here to this post-it. I'm going to copy and paste this article as well. And we can link to it in the mural so that we can reference it if we want to.
Great. I'll do the same thing.
Awesome. That's great. What other data points could we look at?
Let's see. I also know that with there's this sort of phenomenon that we talk about in the U.S. school system where we have long summer breaks, this idea of something called the summer slide, where student learning over that break in school tends to backslide in the quantity and quality of the learning that they've had from the previous year. So I found some research through the Brookings group, brookings.edu, that was talking about the summer learning loss. What is it and what can we do about it? And one of the interesting things that I found is that when students take off several months every year between terms, research has shown that students in the United States can lose as much as 25% of their yearly learning during the low engagement months of summer.
Wow.
So it's definitely potentially a concern that if students aren't learning during this COVID time, they could have something similar to the summer slide, just depending on the quality of their work.
Yeah. Great. That's excellent. I think another thing that we surfaced in the smooth sailing was just issues of internet access. And so I looked up an article on Wikipedia about internet access. And it says here in 2015, the International Telecommunication Union estimated that 3.2 billion people, or almost half of the world's population, would be online by the end of the year. Of them, 2 billion people would be in developing countries, including 89 million from the least developed countries. But what we also know is that the world population is much greater than 3.2 billion people. So a substantial amount of people have low access to internet or spotty internet. And there's actually a really great graph here. I'm going to see if I can pull this in, or maybe I'll just pull in the article, and I'll screen capture this world internet image, and then I can drop that in as well. So just remembering and recognizing that there's limited internet access. And then I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
I'm gonna click from my computer and grab that screenshot that I just took from this Wikipedia article, and I'll add it because this gives the data by region.
Oh, great.
For internet usage. So I'll delete this maybe and just drop this in. Okay, great. Oh, what about social emotional learning? Do we have any statistics on that?
Yeah, I ended up doing a little bit of research around this. So social emotional learning is the skills and attitudes that children and adults learn to manage their emotions, which helps them to create relationships with other people, and that continues and sort of ripples through the rest of their life. I found through I believe it's the National Education Association, that a 2017 survey of studies found that students that participated in social emotional learning curriculum saw an 11% jump in academic achievement. So I'll copy and paste it. I can send you this over the Zoom link as well, if that might be helpful, so you can take a look at it.
Awesome.
There's the research from the National Education Association, and I'll go ahead and copy that piece of data into the mural board.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see the article. I'll cut and paste the article itself and drop it in as well.
Okay, great.
That's great. Okay. So there's the article.
All right, we're really filling out this worksheet.
Yeah, we'll maybe organize it a little bit later. So now I feel like moving on to analyzing with an equity lens.
Yeah, great. So I'm just going to read the instructions too. So now we want to look at the most interesting and troubling data points that we found, and we want to analyze them again, looking for populations of students who are outperforming or underperforming in different areas. And then we're going to describe those populations below, as well as inequities that we see. And then we can define equity through the glossary as well.
Okay. So I think one major thing to consider from an equity perspective is just access to technology.
Yeah.
That's going to impede certain students' abilities to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important one.
Mm-hmm. I think there's another piece here around kind of economic status and work for families. So we have a huge number of students at home. They're not at school right now. And we have some families who've lost their jobs, some families who are working from home, some families whose parents or caregivers still go outside of the home to work. And so I think putting here just a tension between the work from home, learn from home, and learning from home. And then from an equity lens, just economic insecurity and the stressors that that causes.
I think I might add to that some of the information that comes from the summer slide as well, which is that some of these same issues of economic inequity and also the sort of jobs that people try to have or have to have potentially affect the engagement level of parents with their students,
Yep.
Which might lead to a deeper slide than some households than others, I think.
Yep. Yeah. And thinking about I think students who also have less social emotional capacity are going to be more at risk in these times potentially. So I don't know if that's connected to a particular demographic group or just to say that students who have kind of social and emotional needs may be more kind of at risk.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Students, so let's see here. Students with greater SEL needs may be at higher risk during this time. Okay. Right.
Great. All right, maybe we move on to the third box.
Yeah, sounds great.
So let's start working through defining this problem. So based on everything all the data that we've selected, and the lens we've looked through, we wanted to find the problem that our team would like to learn more about and hopefully solve. So what's the problem that we see here? And maybe I'll let you do the Post-it notes this time, and I'll just support you.
Okay, awesome. Great. And then I'll switch. So I feel like there are multiple problems happening. I think one thing is that there's just huge pressure on the family to support their students' learning in a new way while also feeling the kind of pressure of work as well and working in a new environment. So like everyone's in a new space. The family, we're relying much more on the family to help students negotiate and navigate that learning. And so I would just say there's a lot more or maybe new pressure on the family to support students' learning.
Yeah.
I think that's one. And I think that that's one that we can really dig into. The internet access and things is a reality I think that we need to address and face, but could be harder.
And it might be a part of some of the pressure. I mean, kids are not going to figure out the internet thing on their own.
Right.
So that's definitely, another stressor, I think, on the parents. So
yeah. So like technology barriers also cause stress.
Yeah.
For students and families. And then I think there's this compelling one here about the to build on this stress component that there's more stress on everyone, and if you have special needs around your social emotional skills, then you're even more kind of at risk of that. So I think maybe that's the bigger problem in some ways, is that higher stress circumstances are, what should we say, like putting even more pressure on students who struggle with SEL.
Yeah.
And I would say, I'm going to put in parentheses, like, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Things like resilience, motivation, social connection, things like that.
Great.
Okay, cool. All right, you want to
Yeah,
take the next section?
sure. So, what do we want or need to learn more about to better understand the problem we chose? So, we really sort of chose three problems. Is that a problem? Like, uh, not to be, I mean, I guess, yeah. Do we need to narrow this down? I think that all three of them seem pretty great. Or are we leaving it open for the time being?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I wonder if there's kind of a holistic theme here, which is like students need to have more autonomy um, and be able to kind of navigate the situation on their own, and that they need to be able to deal with kind of the increase of pressure and stress.
Yeah, I think that
So
that makes sense.
I wonder if I almost like kind of put these, maybe I'll put them on the side.
Hmm.
And we're going to say that like the big problem is students need um, increased skills around um, autonomy.
And maybe sort of like self-efficacy in their
Yep,
work.
self-efficacy and resilience.
Great.
Awesome.
All right, that's really helpful. So now I think kind of coming back to so that is like a synthesis type of activity is something that we do a lot with this type of work, where we talk through the different ideas. So all three of those post-it notes are quite great, but we need to synthesize it into one so that we can guide ourselves. So now that we have this, what do we need to learn, and what do we need to learn more about so that we can understand the problem that we just chose? So maybe one thing is I would be really curious just to know more from the perspective of parents and students, like what their experiences have been like in the last 8 weeks of this. So just so more like firsthand stories of teaching and learning during COVID-19.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Um, so I'll write more real life stories.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I think I'm in a way, I'm making a lot of assumptions about families and students feeling a lot of pressure and stress.
so
And so I think understanding like how maybe both how students are feeling, are they feeling stressed? And then are families feeling pressure?
all right. So understand how families are feeling pressure.
Yeah. Or if they are.
Yeah. Okay. And then, is there any more?
Maybe one more around like what are the skills and strategies students are using right now? Like I think I'm also making an assumption that they maybe don't have what they need, and so I think learning about that.
Yeah, I think that seems great. So those feel like pretty good areas that we'd like to learn more about. So I
Okay.
might move us to this last one that says, how is the problem connected to the holistic learning outcomes identified through the Promise app? So maybe we can go back over to
Yep.
the main page just to review those. I
Yeah.
believe that they are on page 3.
Yep.
I'm sure you'll show it on your screen.
Yeah.
We
So
can,
I moved over to the left side of the mural,
great.
and we've got these holistic learning outcomes here. So academic proficiency, interdisciplinary proficiency, 21st century growth mindset. So things like critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, creativity, values, self-awareness, resilience, open-mindedness, empathy, respect for diversity, and attitudes, ethical disposition. So taking responsibility, relationship building, ethical decision making, reconciling tension, self-efficacy, and respect for the environment. So I think you named already, but I think self-efficacy is a huge one.
Yeah.
Resilience, we mentioned. I think self-awareness is a good one.
I agree.
And then maybe problem solving.
Yeah, I think that seems great.
Okay.
So I think it'll be nice to hold on to some of these higher level sort of things. So talking about like the values and attitudes that the students are holding on to. So I think maybe let's write down the specific holistic learning outcomes: self-awareness, resiliency, self-efficacy, and problem solving. But let's also hold on to those categories too. So maybe I'll sit here with you. I'll write down some also.
Okay.
Or maybe I'll write down the categories. How about that?
Perfect.
Okay.
Problem solving, self-awareness, resilience, and self-efficacy. Okay, and then I'll zoom out. I'll cut and paste
Great.
Mine and move them.
Great. I'll bring mine over in just a second.
Perfect. I'm going to zoom in here. Great. Okay, cool. So I feel like that's a pretty comprehensive look at the kind of data around the issue and how to kind of define the problem using research data. So should we move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great.